Han stood at the window of the space station, watching the massive ships of the Celestial Empire float by like giant silver fish in a dark sea. His heart beat faster as he straightened his diplomatic uniform. After 6 months of training, he still couldn't believe he was here, representing Earth in the first major diplomatic mission to the Empire. "Stop fidgeting," Jum said from behind him. "You'll do fine." Han turned to face his friend and fellow diplomat. "Easy for you to say. You're not the one giving the welcome speech." The space station's lights dimmed slightly, then brightened again. A soft chime echoed through the halls. The Empire's delegation had arrived. Han took his place in the receiving line with the other Earth diplomats. The doors slid open with a quiet hiss. The alien delegates entered, their tall, graceful forms moving with fluid grace. Their skin shimmered with subtle patterns of light, a trait that no photograph or video had truly captured. That's when Han first saw Ian. Unlike the other Imperial guards who wore ceremonial silver armor, Ian's armor was deep blue with gold trim, marking them as part of the elite royal guard. Han couldn't help but notice how Ian moved differently from the others, more precisely, more alertly, as if they could sense every tiny movement in the room. The formal introductions began. Han stepped forward when it was his turn, speaking clearly in the Empire's language. "Honored delegates, on behalf of Earth's diplomatic court, welcome to Station Aurora." He was proud that his voice didn't shake. 6 months of language training had paid off. The words came out perfectly formed. But as he spoke, something strange happened. The patterns of light on Ian's skin changed, shifting from their normal subtle shimmer to a bright, pulsing blue. Several of the Imperial delegates turned to look at Ian in surprise. Ian seemed just as startled, taking a small step backward. The patterns quickly returned to normal, but Han had seen how the other aliens reacted. Something unusual had just happened. The formal greetings continued, but Han couldn't shake the feeling that Ian was watching him. Every time he glanced in that direction, the guard's eyes were fixed on him with an intensity that should have been uncomfortable, but somehow wasn't. After the ceremony, the delegates moved to the reception area. Han was talking with one of the Imperial scientists about Earth's oceans when he felt a presence behind him. He turned to find Ian standing there. "Your accent," Ian said in perfect English. "You learned our language in the Southern style." Han nodded, surprised. "My teacher was from the southern provinces." "Interesting." Ian's skin patterns shifted slightly, creating what looked like ripples of light. Most Earth diplomats learn the Imperial City dialect. "I thought the southern accent would be more honest," Han said carefully. "It's less formal." A flash of color moved across Ian's skin. Was that amusement? "You prefer honesty to formality." "I prefer understanding to ceremony," Han replied. Ian's head tilted slightly. A dangerous preference in the Empire. Before Han could respond, another guard approached and spoke quietly to Ian in their native language. Han caught only a few words: unusual and report, and something about patterns. Ian straightened, the friendly demeanor replaced by professional distance. "Excuse me, Diplomat Han. Duty calls." As Ian walked away, Jun appeared at Han's side. "Making friends with the Royal Guard already." "Just being diplomatic," Han said, but he couldn't stop watching Ian's retreating form. The patterns on their skin were still rippling, creating shapes he'd never seen in any of the cultural briefings about the Empire's people. Later that night, Han couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about those patterns, about the way the other delegates had reacted. He accessed the station's database and began reading everything he could find about the Empire's bioluminescent communication. What he found made him sit up straight in his bed. According to the records, the patterns Ian had displayed were extremely rare. They only appeared in moments of deep emotional resonance or Han's eyes widened as he read the next part, or during the first moments of a potential bond. He closed the database and stared out his window at the Imperial ships. What exactly had happened in that reception room? And why did he feel like his life had just changed in ways he couldn't yet understand? In her quarters on the Imperial flagship, Yun was asking the same questions, watching the strange new patterns dance across their skin in the mirror, telling a story that hadn't been told in generations. 3 days after the welcome ceremony, Han woke up with a headache and a strange feeling that he wasn't alone. He sat up in his bed and looked around his empty quarters on Station Aurora. The feeling didn't go away. In his mind, he could sense something. No, someone. The presence felt familiar, like a song he had heard before, but couldn't quite remember. On the other side of the station, Eon sat in meditation, trying to understand the new awareness in their mind. The guard's skin glowed with patterns that shouldn't be possible, patterns that hadn't been seen in the Empire for centuries. "You have to report this," said Tai, Eon's commanding officer. He stood watching the shifting lights on Eon's skin with growing concern. "The Queen's advisors need to know." "They'll remove me from duty," Eon said quietly. The patterns swirled faster, showing their distress. "They might even send me back to the homeworld." Tay's expression softened. "This isn't just about you anymore. These patterns, they're like the old stories, the ones about the great bonds." Before Eon could respond, a wave of confusion that wasn't their own washed over them. Han. It had to be him. Without meaning to, Eon sent back a feeling of reassurance. In his quarters, Han gasped as a sense of calm suddenly filled his mind. He knew, somehow, that it came from Eon. The realization made him dizzy. This was impossible. Humans couldn't form telepathic connections. Everyone knew that. But here he was, feeling someone else's emotions. Han's door chimed. He opened it to find June standing there, looking worried. "The Imperial delegation called an emergency meeting," June said. "They're asking for you specifically." Han's heart raced. "Did they say why?" "No, but," June lowered his voice, "I heard them talking about unexpected developments and ancient protocols." As they walked to the meeting room, Han felt the presence in his mind grow stronger. He knew Eon was getting closer. The door opened, and sure enough, Eon stood inside with several high-ranking Imperial officials. The patterns on their skin were barely contained, flashing with anxiety that Han could now feel as clearly as his own. "Diplomat Han," one of the officials said, "are you aware of what is happening?" Han looked at Eon, and their eyes met. In that moment, the connection between them blazed to life. Han staggered backward as memories that weren't his own flooded his mind. Eon's childhood on a world with purple skies, years of guard training, the first time they saw Earth through a telescope. Eon was experiencing the same thing, seeing Han's memories of growing up in coastal Korea, his first day at diplomatic school, the moment he was chosen for this mission. "This is impossible," another official said, watching the patterns on Eon's skin match the rhythm of Han's breathing. "Humans are not capable of forming bonds." "Apparently," said a quiet voice from the back of the room. "We were wrong." Everyone turned. A small woman in elaborate robes stood there. Era, the Queen's personal advisor. Her face showed no emotion, but her voice was heavy with meaning. "The Queen must be informed immediately," she said. "Until then, they must be separated." "No," Han and Eon said together. The thought of separation sent panic through both of them. Era's eyes narrowed. "The bond is already this strong. How long have you hidden this from us?" "We haven't hidden anything," Eon said. "This just happened. We don't even understand what this is." But Han was beginning to understand. He had read about bonds in the station's database, about the legends of species who could share thoughts and feelings. The Empire's people used to form such bonds, but only with their own kind, and even that was rare now. "What happens now?" Han asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Era studied them both. "Now, Diplomat Han, you and Guard Eon have become part of something much bigger than yourselves. The Queen will decide your fate." Through their new bond, Han felt Eon's fear spike. He sent back what he hoped was courage. Whatever was happening, they would face it together. As the officials discussed what to do with them, Han and Ian remained silent, but their minds were far from quiet. They were learning to share thoughts, emotions, even memories. With each passing moment, the bond grew stronger. Neither of them noticed Ara watching them with growing concern, or the message she quietly sent to the Queen. The impossible has happened. The humans are more dangerous than we thought. A week had passed since the emergency meeting. Though the officials wanted to separate Han and Ian, they quickly learned it wasn't that simple. Any attempt to keep them apart for more than a few hours caused both of them physical pain. Han sat in the station's garden chamber, watching the artificial sunset. Through the bond, he could feel Ian approaching before he heard their footsteps. "You're worried," Ian said, sitting beside him. Their skin patterns showed gentle waves of blue and gold. "I can't hide anything from you anymore, can I?" Han smiled slightly. "Would you want to?" Ian asked. Han thought about it. The bond had grown stronger each day. Now they could share not just feelings and memories, but even dreams. Last night, Han had dreamed of flying over Ian's homeworld, seeing its purple skies and 3 moons as clearly as if he'd been there himself. "No," he finally said. "I wouldn't want to hide from you, but I'm worried about what the Queen will decide." Ian's patterns shifted to show concern. "She arrives tomorrow." They sat in comfortable silence, their minds gently touching, sharing thoughts and feelings without words. Through Ian's memories, Han was learning about the Empire's culture faster than any human ever had. Through Han's memories, Ian was beginning to understand Earth's many cultures and ways of life. Suddenly, Han felt a spike of surprise from Ian. "What is it?" "That memory you just shared. The ocean at sunrise. Show me more." Han closed his eyes and thought about his childhood home by the sea. The salty breeze, the sound of waves, the way the early morning light painted the water in shades of gold and pink. Ian's skin blazed with patterns of wonder. "We have nothing like this on my world. Our oceans are frozen." "I'll take you there someday," Han promised without thinking. The patterns on Ian's skin changed to something Han had never seen before, a complex swirl of gold and silver that seemed to dance. "What does that pattern mean?" he asked. Ian looked embarrassed. "It's happiness, a specific kind. The kind that comes with hope for the future." Before Han could respond, the garden door opened. June rushed in, looking worried. "Han, you need to come quickly. Both of you. The Queen's ship just announced they're arriving early. They'll be here in an hour." Han felt fear spike through both himself and Ian. But beneath the fear, something else was growing stronger. Determination. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. As they hurried to prepare for the Queen's arrival, Han noticed something strange. When they walked side by side, Ian's skin patterns seemed to sync with his heartbeat, and if he concentrated, he could feel a sort of resonance between them, like 2 strings vibrating at the same frequency. "I feel it too," Ian said, answering his unspoken thought. The bond is still changing, growing. They reached the main reception hall just as alarms announced the royal ship's approach. Through the huge window, they watched the ship emerge from space, a massive vessel that seemed to be made of living crystal, its surface flowing like liquid silver. Ara appeared beside them, her face stern. "Remember the protocols. Bow low, do not speak unless spoken to, and try to control those patterns. Guard Ian. They're much too emotional." But controlling the patterns wasn't possible anymore. Han and Ian had discovered that the patterns now reflected both their emotions, creating new combinations never seen before. As the Queen's honor guard began filing into the hall, Han felt Ian's memories surface in his mind. Memories of the Queen, of her power and wisdom, but also of her strict adherence to tradition. The Empire had rules about bonds, ancient rules. Rules that had never considered the possibility of a human being involved. Through their bond, Han sent a gentle reminder of all they had learned together in the past week. how their shared memories had made them both stronger, how they could now understand each other's cultures in ways no diplomat ever could. Lun's response came with a new pattern, one that combined courage and affection in swirling lines of blue and gold. The great doors opened. The Queen of the Celestial Empire stood there, her own skin patterns royal purple and silver, marking her status. Her eyes found them immediately. And in that moment, both Han and Ian knew everything was about to change. Queen Mira moved like flowing water across the reception hall. Her skin glowed with royal purple patterns that commanded attention and respect. Everyone bowed deeply as she passed. Han and Ian stood side by side, their hearts beating in sync. Through their bond, they steadied each other. The Queen stopped directly in front of them, her tall form casting a shadow over both. "So," she said, her voice quiet but filling the entire hall, "the rumors are true. You really bonded with the human." She spoke gravely, studying Ian's skin patterns with ancient eyes. Neither Han nor Ian dared to speak. The Queen circled them slowly, watching how their patterns and movements mirrored each other. "In 10,000 years," she continued, "there has never been a bond between our people and humans. Do you know why?" "No, Your Majesty," Ian answered respectfully. The Queen's patterns shifted to show what Han now recognized as concern. Because it was forbidden. After the Great War, when the ancient treaties were signed, both sides agreed. No bonds between our species. Ever. Han felt his heart sink. Through the bond, he felt Ian's fear spike. The thought of being separated now was unbearable. "Your Majesty," Han spoke carefully, "we didn't choose this. It just happened." "Nothing just happens, Diplomat Han." The Queen's patterns darkened. "Bonds are sacred. They are the foundation of our society. And they are dangerous." She turned to face the assembled crowd. "Leave us, all of you, except for Advisor Era." The hall emptied quickly. Only the Queen, Era, Han, and Ian remained. As soon as the doors closed, the Queen's patterns changed to something more personal, less formal. "Show me," she commanded. "Show me the true depth of this bond." Han and Ian looked at each other, unsure what she meant, but their confusion only lasted a moment. Through their bond, they both understood what they needed to do. They joined hands. Instantly, Ian's skin erupted in brilliant patterns that flowed onto Han's skin, making his human flesh glow with imperial light. The Queen stepped back, her own patterns showing surprise. "Impossible," Era whispered. But it wasn't impossible. Through their bond, Han and Ian shared every memory, every feeling, every hope they had discovered together. The light between them grew brighter, filling the hall with new patterns never seen before. "Stop," the Queen commanded. The light faded, but Han's skin still held a faint glow. The Queen walked to a window, looking out at the stars. For a long moment, she was silent. When she turned back, her patterns showed a mix of emotions Han couldn't read. "There was one other," she said finally. 1,000 years ago, a human and one of our kind did bond. Do you know what happened to them?" Han and Ian both shook their heads. They changed everything. Their bond was so powerful it threatened the very balance of power in the galaxy. Wars were fought. Millions died. In the end, they had to be. She paused, her patterns dimming, eliminated. Horror flowed through the bond between Han and Ian. They gripped each other's hands tighter. "Your Majesty," Ian spoke up, their voice strong despite their fear. "We are not them. We don't want power. We don't want to change anything. We just want to be together." The Queen's patterns shifted again, showing something like sadness. "But you have already changed everything. Look at yourselves, a human glowing with our light, a bond that grows stronger by the hour. The treaties are clear about what must be done." "No," Han and Ian said together. Their combined fear and desperation made the patterns between them flash like lightning. The Queen raised her hand for silence. However, she said slowly, I am not bound by ancient treaties, not when the future of both our peoples might depend on understanding what is happening here. Hope flickered through their bond. The Queen continued, "You will be taken to the Imperial Science Academy. There, you will be studied. Every aspect of this bond will be examined. And then I will decide your fate." Era stepped forward, clearly wanting to object, but the Queen's patterns flashed a command for silence. "You have 3 hours to prepare for departure," the Queen said. "Do not try to run. Do not try to hide. The fate of 2 species may rest on understanding what has happened between you." As she turned to leave, Han felt something unexpected through the bond. Ian was smiling inside. "What is it?" he asked through their mental link. "She didn't separate us," Ian replied silently. "Whatever happens next, we'll face it together." The Queen paused at the door, looking back at them one last time. Her patterns showed an emotion neither of them expected to see: hope. The Imperial Science Academy was a massive structure that floated in space, its crystal walls sparkling with thousands of lights. Han and Ian had been there for 3 days, and already they could feel the growing tension. Era stood before the Academy's council, her skin patterns showing controlled anger. "These tests are taking too long. The bond grows stronger every day. Soon we may not be able to break it at all." Han and Ian sat quietly in their observation chamber, but through their bond, they could hear every word. The Academy's walls were designed to block sound, but their connection let them sense everything happening in the council room next door. "You're worried," Han said, feeling Ian's anxiety. "Era has power here," Ian replied. "Many of the older nobles agree with her. They think our bond is dangerous." A group of scientists entered their chamber. Today's tests would study how their bond affected their physical strength. Over the past days, they had discovered that together, they could lift weights that neither could move alone. "Begin the trial," one scientist said. Han and Ian stood together, their skin patterns matching perfectly now. Han's human skin had developed a permanent soft glow, something that frightened many of the Imperial nobles. As they moved through the strength tests, Jun watched from an observation window above. He had refused to return to Earth without Han, saying that his friend needed someone to watch out for his interests. "Remarkable," a scientist said, recording how their combined strength increased with each trial. "The bond enhances their physical capabilities beyond normal limits." Through their connection, Han felt Ian's flash of worry. These results would only make Era more determined to separate them. Later that day, Jun visited them in their quarters. "I found something," he said quietly, looking around to make sure they were alone. "In the old Earth records, there's a story about another human-alien bond from before the Great War, but it's different from what the Queen told us." Han and Ian leaned forward, their patterns showing identical interest. According to the records, the bonded pair didn't cause the war. They tried to prevent it. They could sense attacks before they happened. They saved thousands of lives. "Then why does everyone think they caused the war?" Han asked. "Because," said a new voice, "history is written by those in power." They turned to see an old Imperial scientist standing in the doorway. His name was Dai, and his skin patterns showed wisdom earned through many years of study. "I have been researching your bond," Dai said, entering the room and closing the door. "It is not the curse that Era claims. It is a gift, a very rare and precious gift." Through their bond, Han and Ian shared a moment of hope. "But Era is convincing the council that we're dangerous," Ian said. "Yes," Dai agreed. "She fears change. Many do. But change comes whether we fear it or not." Suddenly, alarms blared through the academy. Red lights flashed in the corridors. "What's happening?" Han asked, but through the bond, he and Ian already knew. They could feel the danger approaching. "Era," Ian said grimly. "She's making her move." Security forces filled the corridors. Through their bond, Han and Ian could sense them surrounding their quarters. "They're going to try to separate us by force," Han said. Daz's patterns showed determination. Then we must prove them wrong. Show them what your bond can really do. June stood by the door. I'll help however I can. Han and Un joined hands, their combined patterns filling the room with bright light. Through their bond, they could sense every guard's position, every weapon, every possible escape route. We won't run, Un said firmly. No, Han agreed. We'll show them the truth, together. Their patterns blazed brighter, and even old Dai stepped back in amazement. The bond between them had grown far stronger than anyone had expected. As Era's forces prepared to break in, Han and Un stood ready to face whatever came next. They were no longer just a human and an Imperial guard. They had become something new, something that hadn't existed in 1,000 years. And they were about to show everyone exactly what that meant. The door to their quarters burst open. Security forces rushed in with devices designed to disrupt Imperial biopatterns, but they weren't prepared for what they found. Han and Un stood in the center of the room, surrounded by a sphere of light created by their combined patterns. The disruption devices had no effect. Stop this immediately. Era commanded from the doorway. Her patterns showed anger and fear. You don't understand what you're doing, Han said. But as he spoke, a sharp pain shot through his head. Through the bond, he felt Un experience the same pain. Something was wrong. Their bodies were changing. Old Dai pushed through the crowd of guards, his scientific devices beeping urgently. Their patterns are merging too quickly, he shouted. The bond is changing their basic biology. Han fell to his knees, his skin now glowing brighter than ever. Un caught him, but they too were struggling to stand. See, Era said to the gathered crowd, this is what we feared. The bond will destroy them both. But Jun had been studying Da's readings. No, he said firmly. They're not being destroyed. They're evolving. Through waves of pain, Han and Un held on to each other. Their minds were more connected than ever, sharing not just thoughts and feelings now, but their very life force. Get a medical team here now, Dai ordered, and bring me the ancient texts from the library. All of them. As guards rushed to obey, Era stepped forward. This must end. For their own safety, we must separate them. No, Han and Un shouted together. The thought of separation brought a pain worse than the physical changes they were experiencing. Dai's assistants arrived with old books and crystal tablets. The scientist quickly began searching through them. Here, he said finally, listen to this. When the first bonding occurred, both beings passed through the fire of change. Their bodies transformed to accommodate the power of their connection. Those who tried to stop this transformation caused great harm. That text is forbidden, Era said sharply. Because it tells the truth, June asked. Like the truth about the bonded pair who tried to prevent the Great War. More pain coursed through Han and Un. Their patterns were creating new colors, new shapes that had never been seen before. The room filled with swirling lights. Their vital signs are going crazy, one of the medical team reported. Heart rates, brain activity, everything is off the charts. Through their bond, Han and Un could feel themselves changing. It was like their bodies were being rewritten, adjusted to handle the power of their connection. But fighting the change hurt more than letting it happen. Let them be, Dai shouted as guards moved to pull them apart. The text is clear. Interrupting this process could kill them. Even Era stepped back as the light around Han and Un grew brighter. Their patterns had completely merged now, creating designs that flowed between them like living art. What's happening to them? Jun asked, shielding his eyes from the bright display. Evolution, Dai said with wonder in his voice. The bond is making them into something new. Something that can exist between our two species. The pain peaked, and both Han and Un cried out. But they didn't let go of each other. Through their bond, they shared strength, helping each other endure the transformation. Suddenly, the light dimmed. The pain eased. Han and Un opened their eyes to find everyone staring at them in amazement. They looked at each other and gasped. Yun's patterns now had colors that were uniquely human, while Han's skin glowed with perfect imperial patterns. They had become a perfect blend of both species. Impossible, Era whispered. No, Dai said, checking his readings. Inevitable. This is what the ancient texts spoke of. The true potential of the bond. The queen must be told, Era said, backing away. Her patterns showed fear and confusion. Yes, said a new voice. Everyone turned to see Queen Mira herself standing in the doorway. I must indeed be told, though it seems I already know. Her patterns showed not fear, but intense interest as she studied Han and Yun's transformed appearance. The time of secrets, she said, is over. Queen Mira ordered everyone to the Academy's great library. Han and Yun walked together, their newly transformed bodies drawing stares from everyone they passed. Their combined patterns now told stories that hadn't been seen in 1,000 years. The library was huge, with walls of crystal that reached up into darkness. Old books and ancient tablets filled endless shelves. The queen led them to a hidden door at the back. This chamber, she said, has been sealed since the Great War. Only the ruling queen may enter. Her patterns showed deep thought as she pressed her hand to the door. It opened with a soft hum. Inside was a small room with a single crystal pedestal. On it lay a book that glowed with its own light. The true history, Queen Mira said, of the humans and our people. She opened the book. Images floated up from its pages, filling the air with scenes from the past. Han and Yun watched in amazement as the story unfolded. Humans, the queen read, were known as the Bridgers. They alone could bond with any species they met among the stars. The images showed humans forming bonds with many different alien races, creating peace and understanding between worlds. Our people feared this power, the queen continued. We saw how humans could unite other species. We worried they would become too powerful. Through their bond, Han and Yun shared their surprise at this revelation. The Empire had always seemed so strong, so confident. The idea that they had feared humans was shocking. But that's not the whole truth, is it? Dai asked quietly. His pattern showed he had guessed something important. The queen turned more pages. New images appeared. Scenes of harmony between humans and Imperials, working together, sharing knowledge, forming bonds. No, the queen admitted. The real truth is that we worked together perfectly. Too perfectly. The other species feared our combined power. They started the Great War to break our alliance. And we let them, Era said suddenly. Her patterns showed she was beginning to understand. We agreed to stop bonding with humans to end the war. We betrayed them, the queen said sadly. We chose peace over truth, over potential, over love. Han felt Yun's guilt through their bond, guilt for what their people had done. He sent back feelings of forgiveness and understanding. The bonded pair from the old stories, Jun said, the ones everyone blamed for the war. They were trying to stop this from happening, weren't they? The queen nodded. They knew the truth. They tried to show everyone how powerful we could be together. But fear won. They were separated, and the truth was hidden away in this room. New images rose from the book, showing how humans and Imperials had once made each other stronger. Their bonds had created advances in science, in medicine, in space travel. Together, they had done amazing things. But now, the queen said, looking at Han and Yun, we can no longer hide from the truth. Your bond has grown even stronger than the ancient ones. You have achieved something we thought impossible. Their combined patterns swirled in response, creating shapes that matched the ancient images perfectly. The prophecy, Dog whispered, his patterns showing excitement. The one about the return of the Bridgers. The queen turned to the last pages of the glowing book. There, written in ancient script, was a prediction. When fear falls away, the Bridgers will return. The first bond will light the way for others to follow. Two peoples, divided by choice, will be united by love. That's why you didn't stop us, Yun said to the queen. You knew about this prophecy. I hoped, the queen admitted. I hoped that finally, after 1,000 years, we were ready for the truth, ready to face our fears. Han looked at their combined patterns, then at the ancient images. What happens now? The queen closed the book gently. Now we have a choice. We can hide the truth again, separate you, continue living in fear. Her patterns shifted to show determination. Or we can be brave. We can show everyone what humans and Imperials can achieve together. Through their bond, Han and Yun shared the same thought. They were ready to be brave, ready to show the way forward. But Era's patterns showed worry. Others will resist. The old fears run deep. Then, the queen said, we must show them something stronger than fear. We must show them hope. Word spread quickly through the academy about the ancient book and its revelations. Not everyone was happy about the truth coming out. Many of the older nobles gathered in the main hall, their patterns showing anger and fear. Han and Yun could feel the tension building. Through their bond, they sensed the growing storm of emotions around them. They're going to try something, Han said quietly to Yun as they walked through the academy's corridors. Yes, Yun agreed. Era has been meeting with the Noble Council. They're afraid of change. The Queen had called for an official announcement to be made to both Earth and the Empire about the return of bonding between their species. The announcement was scheduled for that evening. But Ara had other plans. As Han and Yun entered the main communications center where the announcement would be made, they felt danger through their bond. Imperial guards loyal to the Noble Council blocked all the exits. This stops now, Era said, stepping forward. Her pattern showed grim determination. We cannot allow the old ways to return. The peace we have enjoyed for 1,000 years cannot be risked. The Queen stood at the center of the room, her patterns calm despite the threat. The peace was built on lies. Ara, you know this now. Sometimes lies are safer than truth, Era replied. She signaled to her guards. Take them. Separate the bonded pair. They are too dangerous to be allowed to continue. The guards moved forward, carrying the same disruption devices they had tried to use before. But this time, they had modified the devices to be stronger. Han and Yun stood back to back, their patterns swirling together in perfect harmony. Through their bond, they could feel each other's strength, each other's determination. Wait, June shouted, running into the room. You need to see this. He carried a data tablet showing emergency reports from across the station. More humans and Imperials were beginning to bond. The truth of Han and Yun's connection had awakened something dormant in both species. It's already too late to stop it, Day said, his patterns showing excitement. The Bridgers are returning, just as the prophecy said. Era's patterns flashed with anger. Then we will stop them all. The devices now. The guards activated their disruption devices. Energy filled the room, trying to break the bonds that were forming. Han and Yun felt pain, but their connection stayed strong. Then something amazing happened. Their combined patterns began to glow brighter than ever before. The light spread out from them in waves, touching everyone in the room. Where it touched, it showed the truth. Memories of the ancient days when humans and Imperials had worked together in harmony. Everyone could see it now, the beauty and potential of their united peoples. The fear that had kept them apart for so long began to fade. Stop this, Era commanded, but her own patterns were changing as the light touched her. She could see the truth too, could feel the wrongness of her fear. The disruption devices overloaded and shut down. The guards lowered their weapons, their patterns showing wonder instead of hostility. Through their bond, Han and Yun had done what the ancient bonded pair had tried to do. They had shown everyone a better way forward. The Queen stepped forward, her patterns now matching the hopeful glow that filled the room. The time of separation is over, she declared. We will no longer hide from our true nature, from our true potential. Era fell to her knees, her patterns showing the conflict within her. I only wanted to protect our people, she whispered. The best protection, Han said gently, is understanding. That's what the bonds give us. True understanding of each other. The humans call it empathy, Yun added. It's what makes them special, what makes them bridgers. The Queen looked around the room at her changed people. The announcement will go forward, she said firmly. But now it will be more than just words. Thanks to Han and Yun, we can show everyone the truth. We can show them the way forward. Through their bond, Han and Yun shared a moment of pure joy. They had done it. They had broken through 1,000 years of fear and separation. But they both knew this was just the beginning. There would be more challenges ahead as their peoples learned to trust each other again. But now they had hope. Now they had proof that love was stronger than fear. 1 month after the confrontation in the communication center, Han stood at a window in the Imperial Palace, watching ships arrive from Earth. His skin patterns glowed softly, matching the gentle swirls of color on Yun's skin beside him. More bridgers coming to find their bonds, Yun said, their patterns showing happiness. The Queen had kept her word. The truth about humans and Imperials was now known throughout both worlds. Every day, more humans arrived at Imperial stations and cities, drawn by the possibility of forming bonds of their own. Hard to believe how much has changed, Han said, thinking about the past month. The Academy had been transformed into a center for studying and supporting new bonds. Old Da led the research, working with scientists from both species to understand the ancient connection between their peoples. Jun had become the head of the new Human Imperial Relations Office, helping other humans understand their potential as bridgers. His dedication to understanding both cultures made him perfect for the job. Even Era had changed. After seeing the truth in that moment of shared light, she now worked to help others overcome their fears about bonding. Her own patterns showed peace where there had once been anxiety. The Queen wants to see us, Yun said, sensing a messenger approaching before they arrived. In the throne room, Queen Mira's patterns showed pride as she looked at them. The first of the new bonds, she said warmly. You have changed everything. We had help, Han said modestly. You knew the truth all along. You gave us a chance. The Queen's patterns shifted to show something like mischief. Perhaps. But now I need your help with something new. She waved her hand, and a hologram appeared in the center of the room. It showed a star map with many glowing points of light. Other species are reaching out to us, the Queen explained. They've heard about the return of the Bridgers. They want to know if humans can bond with them too. Han and Yun shared a look of surprise through their bond. They hadn't thought about other species yet. The ancient books say humans could bond with many different peoples. The Queen continued. Perhaps it's time to find out if that's still true. You want us to help make contact? Yun asked. I want you to lead the way, the Queen replied. You've shown us how to overcome fear with understanding. Now we need that more than ever. Through their bond, Han and Yun discussed it without words. They shared images, feelings, hopes for the future. After everything they'd been through, the idea of helping others find the same connection was appealing. We'll do it, they said together. The Queen's patterns showed approval. Good. But first, there's something else we need to do. She led them out to a balcony overlooking the capital city. A huge crowd had gathered below. Humans and Imperials standing together, their patterns creating a beautiful light show in the evening air. Today, the Queen announced, her voice carrying to all. We celebrate the first official bonding ceremony in 1,000 years. Han and Yun looked at each other in surprise. Through their bond, they felt each other's joy at this moment. The ceremony was simple but beautiful. The Queen spoke the ancient words of blessing as Han and Yun's patterns merged into new complex designs that told the story of their love and commitment. Let this be the first of many such ceremonies, the Queen declared. Let the bonds between our peoples grow stronger with each passing day. As the crowd cheered, Han and Yun stood together, their patterns creating shapes of hope and promise. Through their bond, they shared a vision of the future, a future where no one had to hide who they were or who they loved. Somewhere in the crowd, they spotted Ara watching with peaceful patterns. Near her, Junt was talking excitedly with a group of newly arrived humans. Old Dad was showing some children, both human and imperial, how their patterns could dance together. "Ready for our next adventure?" Han asked through their bond. Im's pattern swirled with joy. "With you. Always." Above them, the 3 moons of the imperial homeworld shone brightly, their light mixing with the patterns of the celebrating crowd. It was a new era for both their peoples, and it had all started with a simple truth. Love was stronger than fear, understanding was greater than ignorance, and together they could bridge any distance between worlds.